I'm Mario Anderson, and welcome to In Focus Kentucky, where each week we take a look at issues that matter to you and talk directly to the lawmakers and community organizers who help shape policy. On today's episode, we are broadcasting from the Kentucky State Capitol and previewing the 2019 General Assembly session that got started back during the first week of January. Now, this new legislative session officially gaveled in on Tuesday, January the 8th, and for those who may not be aware, during odd-numbered calendar years, the regular sessions are half as long as in even-numbered years. So this year's session will have two parts. Part 1 started back on January the 8th, and it lasted through January the 11th, with Part 2 of the session beginning during the first week of February. Now, lawmakers from both parties and both chambers spent the first 4 days of the 2019 session focused on organizational work, which included electing legislative leaders, adopting rules of procedure, and organizing committees. Now, there have been dozens of bills that have been pre-filed by various lawmakers, but whether they are brought to the floor or not depends on party leaders. Now, Republicans, they have the supermajority in both of the House chambers and the Senate chamber, and also the governor's office for the third year in a row. And joining me now to talk more about the opening week and 2019 overall legislative priorities from the Senate's perspective on the Republican side is Majority Leader Damon Thayer of Scott County. We appreciate your time and joining us for our In Focus Kentucky taping on the road here at the Capitol.
Always great to be with you. Thanks for coming to the Capitol.
Well, let's talk about some of this legislation. Senate Bill 1 was introduced with dealing with school safety, and what does that entail, but also what are you hoping to accomplish with that particular bill?
Senate Bill 1 is the school safety bill, and it is a direct result of the tragic shooting that occurred a year ago in Marshall County in West Kentucky. And we wanted to take a contemplative approach to the problem, and we appointed a bipartisan traveling working group led by Senator Max Wise and Majority Leader Bam Carney, both from Taylor County, traveled around the state gathering opinion on various ways to secure our schools. And Senator Wise filed that bill yesterday. It is the top priority this session, and it will deal with basically three aspects of school safety: hardening the targets, making the school safer and harder for an active shooter to access. It will also deal with mental health counseling with recommendations there, and it will also deal with training for more school resource officers in our schools.
Now, there is a lot of support, obviously, for the particular bill, but there's always the question about funding and how can you allocate dollars to that. Is that something that's going to be attached, you think, in this particular conversation, or is it 2020 discussion?
Yeah, we hope to pass the framework in Senate Bill 1 this year, and once we get a better handle on the cost related to that, we'll deal with that in the budget next year. I don't see much enthusiasm for opening up the budget here in the off year, the short session. It requires a 3/5 supermajority to deal with taxes and spending in a short session. So I think we'll try to get the framework passed. A lot of it can be implemented by the school districts, and then any of the cost drivers we'll deal with in the budget next year.
And share with us about that supermajority. How will that impact kind of some of the, excuse me, the legislation that you all have, which you're hoping to introduce and potentially get into law?
Well, when the Constitution was changed 20 years ago, the writers of the constitutional amendment said that in order to raise any taxes or deal with any tax bills or appropriations, you had to have a 3/5 supermajority, which is 23 votes out of 38 in the Senate and 60 out of 100 in the House of Representatives. And that was a taxpayer protection. It makes it harder to raise taxes, which is good, and it also means that you have to have a higher threshold in order to change the budget, which is good, because I'm really not a strong proponent unless there's a real emergent reason for opening up the budget. I'd rather deal with it during the longer 60-day session as we prepare the two-year spending plan that goes into a place in July of even-numbered years.
In our last few moments, any other top priority items that you want to be able to get out there before the session ends?
Well, pension reform continues to be really the most important thing that we have to do that affects all Kentuckians. And after the unfortunate decision by the Supreme Court, which I disagree with, by the way, we have to start from scratch. And we're still putting together our plan, but I predict there will be significant time spent on teachers' pension reform in order to protect taxpayers and protect retirees and future retirees in our teachers' retirement system. So that really sort of is an overlay to the entire session, because until we can pass a bill that's signed into law by the governor that the Supreme Court won't overrule, this problem still exists, and we've got to figure out a way to stop the digging and start filling the dirt back in the hole on these pension systems. And it doesn't just require money, it requires structural reforms, and so we're going to continue to take a hard look at those as well.
Well, Senator Thayer, we appreciate your time and for joining us, and we'll continue to see the progress that's being made.
Thank you for the time and attention that you put on the People's House here in the General Assembly.
You bet. Stay with us on In Focus Kentucky. Coming up, you'll hear from House Majority Leader Bam Carney as he shares the legislative priorities for his caucus coming up next.
We're also going to spend some time discussing welfare reform. You know, we want to continue to do what we've done in the last 2 years, build upon an economic growth policy that's, you know, led the Commonwealth to record investments, and part of that's workforce.
But first, what's the latest weather forecast in your area? You'll find out next in your Weather on the Ones.